Hello there, everyone. Upon seeing some questions and commentaries and requests here and there, I thought I would share my thoughts in video form about copper. Now, just two facts before I get too deep into the details of my copper thesis. The first being, I am a long-term copper bull. And the second being, I have no pure copper or majority copper position at this point. Now, to explain my view on how those statements are not at odds with each other, I thought I'd get into what I'm seeing going on in the world. Okay, so let's start with the US dollar. The strength in the US dollar has been an issue for the rest of the globe recently, past year or so. Now, due to the US dollar being the global reserve currency, there's a lot of foreign debt issued in US dollars. Similarly, commodities outside the US are priced in US dollars. So the price of a dollar goes up, the price of commodities, while staying the same, goes up for people outside of the US. Now, non-US countries cannot issue US dollars to stimulate or stimulate growth or inflate away debt or such things. In fact, doing such things will, in the way they can do it, will weaken their currency and make the US dollar even more expensive. Now, if the US dollar continues to rise, as it has been doing, or it's been going sideways recently, but if it continues to rise, the rest of the globe will face economic headwinds because they won't be able to finance their debt as easily and get their commodities as easily because they'll effectively be more expensive even if the price stays the same. Now, eventually, this will circle back to the US domestic, but not before wrecking or causing significant headwinds to economies around the world. Now, elaborating on why I think a strong US dollar would be a significant challenge for copper, well, Dr. Copper, I'm sure you've heard, is uh, a saying that the price of copper is a sign for the global economy. That's because copper is a base metal and is used in a lot of economically sensitive things. But herein lies the problem. How does the demand for copper go up with a strong US dollar and US economy? So how could I say this? If the US, I just said that if the US economy is strong, I didn't think demand would increase, which is, of course, ridiculous inside of the US, because if the US economy is strong, demand in the US will increase, but so will the US dollar theoretically, which then the US dollar being strong would deflate demand in the rest of the world, particularly some countries that have much bigger demand for copper than the US. So now the next three slides, I'm going to examine the three scenarios I think are most likely moving forward from where we are and what would happen to the US, the world, and copper in those scenarios. Scenario one, the US economy is strong while the rest of the world weakens. In this case, the US dollar rises, commodities become effectively more expensive for the rest of the world because they buy commodities in US dollars. Meanwhile, the weakening economies around the world reduces the demand. The result of this, probably not a bullish scenario for copper demand near term. Scenario number two, as the US economy takes a turn or weakens, doesn't have to have a recession, but weakens, so does the US dollar, and the recessions or the pending recessions or whatever you're seeing around the world, they play out and eventually the the global economy improves. Now, in the near term, again, the U.S. having an economic slowdown is probably not bullish for copper. Now, this may help uh, places around the world eventually as they progress through their economic struggles, but immediately, it the U.S. heading into recession, I'd find it hard for the copper price to increase drastically. And scenario number three is the U.S. weakens, or, and this is another potential, or the U.S. dollar weakens through central bank money printing or such, and this eventually, while weakening the US dollar, helps the global economy. To this, depending on how the US weakens, it could be bullish for copper or not. The basics of the thesis are this. If the US dollar continues to go up, it's likely bearish for copper. If the US dollar goes down, it may be bullish for copper. Now, for those of you who saw the most recent Federal Reserve meeting, you might be asking at this point, but didn't the Fed just give up on strengthening the dollar? To that, I would say maybe, maybe not. But if they did, which one could argue based on some of the things they said, that probably isn't a sign of a strong and booming US economy. But that being said, since the Fed talked on that day, the dollar has moved back towards its recent highs. So whatever they said obviously wasn't bearish enough for the dollar. Now, as to the bull thesis that you've probably seen is one that I agree with. Eventually, there will not be enough copper supply at today's prices or slightly higher prices. Now, the pushback on that I would give is a lot can happen between now and eventually. So longer term, the supply-demand deficit, in my view, will likely push the prices of copper significantly higher. But between now and that time, the demand for copper could drastically undershoot the supply if there's some negative turn in the economy near term. Such causes for such an event could be a recession, an increased severity of the trade war, general fear, deflation, or just US dollar strength, all of which could knock copper down to $2, potentially lower, which would do serious damage to some copper stocks. And now to why I don't have any copper at present. If I'm betting on US dollar weakness, then buying gold or gold stocks would be the same bet, to which I am presently overweight. Now, it's my opinion that this is a similar bet with less circumstances where it would have as big a drop or as much of a risk scenario as copper. So, in other words, if the US dollar goes down, I think that that is the scenario that would be bullish for copper. But I believe that scenario would more likely be bullish for gold. And within the copper framework, it depends how the US dollar weakens. In other words, I don't see a likely near-term bullish copper scenario that isn't also bullish for gold. But there are a few scenarios that are bearish for copper but bullish gold. So my thinking here, and maybe it's smart, maybe it's dumb, but I'm playing the odds rather than diversification. Now, to all the copper bulls out there, I get it. I see why you're bullish. With the 5-year time horizon, I agree. If stocks were only able to be bought and sold now and then again in 5 years, I would think that I would own copper stocks because 5 years is a long time, but I share your 5-year view. And who knows, also, my lack of probable winning scenarios for copper could be already be priced in. We could see that the market is seeing that, okay, nothing maybe unlikely near term that is a bullish scenario for copper happens. So we'll price that in, and then if the bad scenario happens, maybe the copper is like, okay, we're we're done this. Now let's look to what's next. That's completely possible. You see that in some other markets. So I'm not precluding that possibility. Similarly, in my tons of time that I spend researching, I've come across some seemingly pretty cheap and growing and very well, well, historically well run copper stocks, copper companies, that is, and some that I think will be multiples of today's price within a few years. This this video is mainly meant to point out the risks that I see near term and longer term with copper. But as I stated on the second slide, I am to a long-term copper bull. Well, that's it, everyone. I thank you for watching and welcome any questions or comments about what I said, or if you have some information that I don't about why you like or don't like copper near or longer term. So looking forward to seeing that, but until next time, have a great day.